Welcome to Empathy Stories, where we explore powerful tales of resilience, courage, and the profound strength found in unexpected places. Today, we bring you the story of Jessica Walker, a disabled veteran whose quiet determination and unshakable will unravel a criminal empire. Get ready for an emotional journey packed with lessons about strength, perseverance, and the power of the human spirit. In the small, unassuming town of Cedar Falls, Wyoming, a gentle breeze swept through the streets as the evening sun cast long, golden shadows. Cedar Falls was the kind of place where time moved slowly, where neighbors greeted one another with warm smiles, and where life seemed simple on the surface. But beneath the serenity lay stories of resilience, of hidden battles and quiet strength, none more extraordinary than that of Jess Walker. Jess was a regular at the local cafe, often seen sipping her coffee by the corner window, her wheelchair positioned just so she could see the ebb and flow of life outside. To most, she was just another resident, a disabled veteran quietly living out her days after a devastating injury in Afghanistan. But Jess was far from ordinary. Her wheelchair wasn't just a tool of necessity, it was her cover. She had spent years perfecting the art of invisibility, letting people see only what they expected: vulnerability, limitation, and quiet defeat. On this particular evening, Jess wheeled herself through the cafe's doors, her movements deliberate and calm. Jenny, the young and cheerful cafe owner, greeted her with a bright smile. "Your usual, Jess?" Jenny asked, her voice carrying warmth that had become a rare comfort in Jess's otherwise solitary life. "Yes, please. It's been one of those days," Jess replied, offering a small smile of her own. She maneuvered her chair to her favorite spot, the corner table near the window. From here, she had a clear view of the street and the door, a habit from her days in the military that she could never quite shake. Jess wasn't there for the coffee or the fleeting sense of normalcy. She was there to observe. Cedar Falls was her battleground, and tonight, she knew the enemy would make their move. It began innocuously enough. The door chimed as three men entered the cafe, their leather vests adorned with the Iron Viper's insignia. Jess didn't need to look twice to recognize them. Victor the Snake Harris, the gang's leader, sauntered in with his usual swagger, flanked by two of his men. Their presence was like a storm cloud rolling in, disrupting the cafe's peaceful atmosphere. "Well, look who it is," Victor drawled, his voice dripping with mock respect. "Our favorite local hero." Jess didn't flinch. She sipped her coffee, her wheelchair angled for an easy exit. Her heart rate remained steady, her expression neutral. This wasn't her first encounter with Victor and his men, but something about tonight felt different. Their movements were too calculated, their demeanor too smug. Victor leaned in, his breath reeking of cigarettes and cheap whiskey. "You know what I can't figure out," he said, his tone darkening. "How someone like you manages to always be around when we're doing business. It's almost like you're watching us." Jess met his gaze, her voice steady. "I live here, Victor. Small town. Not many places to be." Victor's second in command, Mike Crusher Davis, circled behind her chair. Jess could feel his presence like a shadow looming over her. She didn't turn to look. She didn't need to. Years of training had honed her instincts to a razor's edge. "Maybe we should help you find somewhere else to be," Crusher said, his tone menacing. "Accidents happen to people in chairs all the time." Jess's fingers tightened imperceptibly on her armrest. She could end this confrontation in seconds if she wanted to dislocate Crusher's knee, disarm Victor, and take down the third man before anyone could react. But she didn't. She had learned the value of patience, of letting the enemy believe they had the upper hand. Sometimes, the most dangerous weapon was letting people underestimate you. Victor grabbed the handles of her wheelchair, spinning her to face him. "You've got one day to leave town," he sneered. "After that, let's just say we know people at the VA. Benefit checks can get lost real easy." Jess looked down, letting fear flicker in her eyes. Fear that wasn't real, but convincing enough to satisfy Victor's ego. I understand," she stammered, forcing a tremor into her voice. "Please, I don't want any trouble." Victor smirked, his gold-capped teeth glinting in the fading light. "Smart girl," he said, nodding to Crusher. "Show her what trouble looks like anyway." Crusher grabbed Jess's chair, tilting it violently and spilling her onto the floor. Coffee splashed across the tiles as the gang erupted in laughter. Jess lay there, seemingly helpless, her heart burning with controlled fury. She memorized their faces, their laughter, the arrogance in their eyes. Each of them would pay for this humiliation. But not tonight. Jenny rushed over as the gang swaggered out, her face flushed with anger. "Jess, are you okay? I called the sheriff. Those bastards can't get away with this." Jess waved her off, her voice calm despite the storm brewing inside her. "It's fine, Jenny. Everything's exactly the way it needs to be." She pulled herself back into her chair with practiced ease, her movements deliberate and measured. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, a message from her FBI handler confirming the Iron Viper's weapon shipment for tomorrow night. As she dried herself off, a faint smile played on her lips. The Iron Vipers thought they'd won, that they'd scared her into leaving Cedar Falls. What they didn't realize was that Jess Walker never ran from a fight. She planned it. Tomorrow, the hunters would become the hunted. Night fell over Cedar Falls, cloaking the quiet streets in a veil of shadows. Jess Walker sat in her dimly lit home, the soft glow of her computer screen illuminating her determined expression. Her modest house on the outskirts of town had been her base for 3 years, chosen for its clear sight lines and multiple escape routes. Tonight, it would serve as the nerve center for an operation years in the making. The Iron Vipers thought they'd broken her earlier at the cafe, but they had only emboldened her. The humiliation they inflicted had become a tool, a means to let them lower their guard. Jess's wheelchair wasn't just a device. It was a carefully engineered instrument of deception. Inside its reinforced frame were compartments housing weapons, surveillance equipment, and tools that transformed her into a one-woman tactical unit. Her secure phone buzzed. Agent David Cooper's voice crackled through the line. "Jess, are you ready for this? We got teams positioned around the lumberyard, but we need you to confirm when the shipment arrives." Jess's jaw tightened. "I'll be there. Don't worry about me. Just remember," Cooper added, his voice laced with caution, "we need to secure the evidence and the buyers. No heroics." Heroics. Jess almost laughed at the word. For 3 years, she had lived under a veil of invisibility, letting everyone assume she was just a disabled veteran trying to survive. The world loved heroes who stood tall, but they underestimated the kind who moved silently in the shadows. By the time she reached the outskirts of the abandoned sawmill, the air was thick with tension. Jess positioned herself in a patch of tall grass overlooking the yard, her wheelchair silent as a ghost on the uneven terrain. Through her night vision scope, she saw the Iron Vipers milling about, their movements confident and unhurried. Trucks laden with crates rolled into the yard, headlights flashing twice, a signal. Victor, the snake, Harris emerged from the shadows, his leather jacket catching the faint glow of the moonlight. He strode toward the trucks, his cocky swagger a testament to how secure he felt in his dominion. Jess could almost hear his gravelly voice in her head, mocking her, reveling in the idea that she was long gone. But she wasn't gone. She was here, watching, waiting. As the minutes ticked by, more figures appeared, buyers, dressed in suits and exuding the kind of menace that came from wielding power and money. Among them, a man who stood out, Daniel Sullivan, the dishonorably discharged colonel. His military bearing was unmistakable, even as he exchanged briefcases with Victor. The sight of Sullivan made Jess's blood boil. This was the man pulling the strings, using the Iron Vipers as pawns in a much larger game. Her phone buzzed again. Cooper's voice came through, steady but tense. "That's Sullivan. He's our link to the entire network. We can't afford to lose him." Jess replied calmly, "We won't." She took a deep breath, steadying herself. She had spent years preparing for this moment, training her body and mind to adapt to the life she now lived. The wheelchair wasn't her weakness. It was her greatest weapon. She rolled closer to the edge of the grass. Her movements calculated and deliberate. The Vipers were too focused on the deal to notice her presence. They never looked down, never considered the possibility that a threat could come from someone they deemed powerless. Through her scope, Jess watched Victor's smug grin as he inspected the contents of the crates, military-grade weapons capable of arming a small army. She marked each figure in her mind, cataloging their positions and their vulnerabilities. She knew every inch of the sawmill's layout, every shadow, every corner that could serve as cover. Suddenly, Sullivan's voice carried across the yard. "You're late, Victor. The buyers aren't known for their patience." "Relax," Victor replied, lighting his cigarette. "Everything's here, just like I promised." Jess's grip on her chair's controls tightened. She whispered into her comm, "All units, prepare to engage. Wait for my signal." The minutes dragged on, each one a test of Jess's discipline. She could end this with one shot. Take out Victor or Sullivan and leave the Vipers in chaos. But it wasn't enough to take out one man. The entire network needed to crumble, and that required precision. Then, the signal she'd been waiting for came. Not from her comms, but from the careless overconfidence of her enemies. One of the buyers, dissatisfied with the delay, raised his voice, drawing attention away from the perimeter. It was all Jess needed. "Go," she whispered. The scene erupted into chaos. FBI agents emerged from the shadows, their movements swift and calculated. Floodlights blazed to life, illuminating the yard in harsh white light. The Vipers scrambled, their bravado replaced by panic. Victor shouted orders, his voice barely audible over the commotion. Jess moved with the precision of a predator. Her wheelchair's modifications allowed her to navigate the uneven terrain effortlessly. She fired a non-lethal shot at one of the guards, taking him down before he could reach for his weapon. Another man turned, his gun trained on her, but Jess was faster. She rammed her wheelchair into his legs, sending him sprawling. Victor's voice cut through the chaos. "Find her, the woman in the chair. Take her out." Jess allowed herself a grim smile. For years, they had dismissed her, seen her as insignificant. Now, she was a focal point of their desperation. Amid the firefight, Sullivan began retreating toward one of the trucks, his movements deliberate and calculated. He wasn't running. He was repositioning, using the chaos as cover. Jess saw him reach into his coat, pulling out a device she couldn't identify. "Cooper," she said urgently. "Sullivan's making a move. I'm going after him." "Jess, wait." But Jess had already wheeled forward, her focus locked on Sullivan. He was her target, the keystone of the entire operation. Without him, the network would collapse. The sawmill had become a battlefield, but Jess thrived in the chaos. Every move she made was deliberate, every shot precise. She wasn't just fighting for justice. She was fighting to prove that strength comes in many forms, and that the greatest power lies in resilience. The aftermath of the firefight at the sawmill left the night heavy with tension. Smoke curled through the air, illuminated by the fading headlights of abandoned trucks. Jess Walker sat still for a moment, catching her breath, her hands gripping the edges of her wheelchair. The Iron Vipers had been subdued, and most of the buyers were in custody. But Sullivan had vanished into the chaos. Her earpiece crackled. "Jess!" Agent David Cooper's voice was sharp. "Urgent. We got a problem." Sullivan slipped through the net. "We're tracking him, heading toward the foothills." "He's not running. He's regrouping." Jess's jaw tightened. "Do we have eyes on his location?" "Not yet," Cooper replied, "but we intercepted some comm chatter. He's heading to a secondary rendezvous. Sounds like a hidden airfield." "Jess, he's not alone. We've got confirmation he's working directly with someone higher up, someone called the Architect." The name hung in the air like a specter. Jess felt a chill run down her spine. She had heard whispers of the Architect before, a shadowy figure orchestrating military-grade weapons deals and trafficking operations. Sullivan was dangerous, but this figure was the true mastermind. Jess wheeled herself toward one of the downed trucks, her mind racing. Her wheelchair was more than just a means of mobility. It was her platform for combat, survival, and strategy. With every breath, she calculated her next move. This wasn't just about taking down Sullivan anymore. It was about dismantling an empire. "Cooper," she said, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. "I'm heading to the airfield." "Jess, wait for backup," he urged. "There's no time," she snapped. "If the architect is there, this is our chance to end it all." Jess moved swiftly, her wheelchair's modifications humming softly as she navigated the rough terrain leading away from the sawmill. The air was cold, biting against her skin, but she hardly noticed. Her thoughts were consumed by the name, the architect, a figure who had remained elusive for years, always one step ahead of law enforcement. And now, she was close. By the time she reached the outskirts of the airfield, the night had deepened, and the stars above seemed distant, indifferent. The airfield was nestled in a secluded valley, surrounded by dense forests. Jess paused at the edge of the tree line, her night vision goggles revealing a scene of methodical chaos. Trucks were unloading crates into 3 massive cargo planes. Men moved with military precision, their weapons gleaming under the harsh lights of the airstrip. Jess's earpiece crackled again. "We've got satellite visuals," Cooper informed her. "This operation is bigger than we thought. Those planes aren't just carrying weapons. They're carrying servers, quantum computing cores." Her heart sank. "Quantum cores? What's their play?" "They're building a shadow intelligence network," Cooper explained. "If they succeed, they'll have the power to breach military defenses, control infrastructure, and destabilize entire nations. This isn't just about weapons anymore, Jess. This is about global control." Jess clenched her fists, her resolve hardening. "Then we ended tonight." She moved silently through the shadows, her wheelchair modified for stealth. The reinforced tires made no sound against the gravel, and her low profile kept her below the line of sight of the guards patrolling the perimeter. Every movement was deliberate, her training as a soldier and her years of adaptation melding seamlessly into the hunter she had become. As she approached the airfield, she spotted Sullivan near the largest cargo plane. He was speaking to someone, a tall woman with an authoritative presence. Even from a distance, Jess knew who she was. The architect. The woman's voice carried across the airstrip, cold and commanding. "You've wasted enough time, Sullivan. The buyers are nervous, and the operation is exposed. We launch tonight." Jess's earpiece buzzed. "Jess, are you seeing this?" Cooper's voice was urgent. "That's the architect. We need her alive." "Understood," Jess whispered, but she knew capturing the architect wouldn't be easy. Jess positioned herself behind a stack of crates, her eyes locked on the architect. She studied her movements, her gestures. The architect exuded control, but Jess knew that control could be a weakness. People like her, who relied on dominance, often crumbled when faced with chaos. Taking a deep breath, Jess activated her calm. "Cooper, I'm engaging." "Jess, wait for," but she cut the line before he could finish. There was no room for hesitation now. Jess moved swiftly, her wheelchair gliding silently over the rough terrain. She activated a small drone she had hidden in one of her chair's compartments, sending it toward the cargo planes. The drone released a series of flashbangs, their brilliant light and deafening noise throwing the airfield into chaos. The guards scrambled, their formation breaking. Jess seized the moment. She rolled into the open, her rifle steady in her hands. Her first shot disabled one of the guards, sending him sprawling. The second shot took out a floodlight, plunging a portion of the airfield into darkness. Sullivan turned, his face twisting in shock. "It's her," he shouted. "The woman in the chair." Jess allowed herself a grim smile. They had underestimated her for too long. The architect didn't flinch. Instead, she turned to Sullivan. "Deal with her," she said coldly. Retreating toward the cargo plane, Jess pushed forward, her wheelchair's modifications allowing her to maneuver with unmatched precision. She took out 2 more guards, her movements fluid and controlled. But as she closed in on the architect, Sullivan stepped into her path, his gun drawn. "You should have stayed in Cedar Falls," Sullivan sneered. Jess didn't reply. Instead, she rammed her wheelchair into his legs, sending him off balance. In one smooth motion, she disarmed him, her rifle aimed at his chest. Sullivan, it's over, she said, her voice calm but firm. Your operation is done. But Sullivan laughed, a chilling sound that sent a shiver down Jess's spine. You don't get it, do you? You've already lost. The architect isn't just a person. She's an idea. You can't stop her. Jess tightened her grip on her rifle. Watch me. Before Sullivan could respond, a sharp whistle cut through the air. Jess turned just in time to see the architect boarding the plane, her silhouette illuminated by the dim light. Jess, you need to stop that plane. Cooper's voice was back in her earpiece. Jess didn't hesitate. She activated her wheelchair's hidden rocket launcher, a custom modification she had saved for emergencies. A single, precise shot struck the plane's wing, igniting a fire that sent the cargo spilling onto the tarmac. The architect stumbled out of the plane, her expression dark but composed. For the first time, she locked eyes with Jess. You've impressed me, she said, her voice carrying over the chaos. But you've only delayed the inevitable. Jess wheeled closer, her rifle trained on the architect. This ends now. The architect raised her hands in mock surrender, a faint smile on her lips. Does it? Or is this just the beginning? As federal agents swarmed the airfield, Jess knew she had won the battle. But the architect's words lingered in her mind. This wasn't just about one operation. This was about the future, and Jess was determined to fight for it, no matter the cost. The chaos at the airfield finally settled as federal agents secured the site. The remaining guards were apprehended. Sullivan was dragged away in handcuffs, and the fires from the cargo planes were extinguished. The architect, Caroline Moore, sat restrained, her expression unreadable as she was led into a transport vehicle. The night was quiet again, but the echoes of what had transpired hung heavy in the air. Jess Walker sat in her wheelchair a short distance away, watching the scene unfold. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by the ache of old wounds and the weight of reflection. Around her, the key players in this battle each found themselves caught in the gravity of their choices, each silently grappling with the lessons learned. Jess wheeled herself closer to the transport vehicle, holding Caroline. For a moment, their eyes met through the glass. Jess spoke softly, almost to herself. You wanted to prove that pain makes us stronger, that by taking away, you could force people to grow. But strength doesn't come from what's taken. It comes from what we choose to give, even when the world has taken everything. She turned her chair toward the horizon, the first rays of dawn breaking over the valley. Jess had been through hell, but she had reclaimed her life, her purpose, and her sense of self. The wheelchair doesn't define me. My losses don't define me. What defines me is how I move forward, one battle at a time, and how I make sure no one else has to fight battles they never asked for. Victor sat slumped in the back of a police van, his bravado gone. He stared at the floor, replaying the events of the night in his mind. For years, he had thought power came from intimidation, from control. But now, he realized how fragile his empire had been. He muttered to himself, all that swagger, all those threats, none of it meant anything. It's not strength if you need to tear someone else down to feel powerful. He thought of Jess, how she had outsmarted and outmaneuvered him. Real strength isn't loud. It doesn't need to be. It just is. Sullivan leaned back in his seat, his hands cuffed and his face dark with bitterness. 3 years, he muttered under his breath. 3 years of planning, undone by someone I dismissed as weak. He thought about Jess, about the way she had turned every disadvantage into an advantage. He had underestimated her, just as he had underestimated everyone who didn't fit his narrow vision of power. He let out a bitter laugh. Weakness isn't what I thought it was. Neither is strength. I was blind to both. Cooper stood at the edge of the airfield, watching as the operation wrapped up. He thought about Jess, about the risks she had taken and the strength she had shown. He had always respected her as an agent. But tonight, he had seen her as something more. She never needed backup, he murmured to himself. She was the backup for all of us. He shook his head, a wry smile tugging at his lips. Lesson learned: strength isn't about standing tall. It's about standing firm, no matter how much the world tries to knock you down. As the dawn broke fully over Cedar Falls, the airfield grew quiet. Jess watched the last of the transport vehicles disappear down the road, taking with them the remnants of a shattered operation. She turned her chair toward the rising sun, feeling its warmth on her face. She had won this battle, but she knew the war wasn't over. There would always be people like Caroline, always forces trying to manipulate others for power. But Jess also knew something else. There would always be people like her, standing firm in the face of those forces. The wheelchair hummed softly as she rolled toward the horizon, her voice a whisper carried by the wind. Strength isn't given. It's earned, and it's earned every single day. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey of strength and self-discovery. Jessica's story reminds us all that true power comes from within, and resilience can turn even the hardest challenges into opportunities. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Empathy Stories for more inspiring tales of human triumph. Together, let's celebrate the courage that defines us all. Until next time, stay strong and stay inspired.